Today, we focus on an extraordinary turn in the long-running conflict between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. United States President Donald Trump has appeared on his Truth Social platform to make a brief but carefully worded statement that may signal the most significant breakthrough in months. In his words, everybody will be treated fairly, as he hailed what he described as Hamas's apparent agreement to release hostages as a special day. The message, though short in duration, carried immense weight. Standing against the familiar backdrop of the White House, President Trump delivered his remarks with visible determination, saying that after weeks of negotiations and behind-the-scenes talks, there is finally a sense that all parties may be inching toward a workable agreement. For a conflict that has seen repeated cycles of bloodshed and stalemate, even a modest step forward is treated as a seismic development. In his video, which was recorded earlier in the day and released on his social media account, the president took time to thank the regional powers he said played a pivotal role in facilitating progress. He specifically mentioned Qatar, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, and what he described as so many others. In Trump's words, "I want to thank the countries that helped me put this together. Qatar, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, and so many others. So many people fought so hard. This is a big day. We will see how it all turns out. We have to get the final word down in concrete. Very importantly, I look forward to having the hostages come home to their parents and having some of the hostages, unfortunately, the condition they're in, come home likewise to their parents because their parents wanted them just as much as though that young man or young woman were alive." So I just want to let you know that this is a very special day, maybe unprecedented in many ways. It is unprecedented, but thank you all, and thank you all to those great countries that helped. We were given a tremendous amount of help. Everybody was unified in wanting this war to end and seeing peace in the Middle East, and we're very close to achieving that. Thank you all, and everybody will be treated fairly. The tone of the president's address was both optimistic and deliberate, blending gratitude with an unmistakable insistence that the breakthrough must translate into tangible, enforceable steps. For many watching around the world, the moment marked the first time in months that the language of peace rather than threats of escalation dominated the headlines. The president's statement comes after a period of intense shuttle diplomacy that involved not only the United States, but also regional mediators. Qatar has long hosted Hamas's political leadership and has served as a critical channel for dialogue. Turkey, under President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, has at times clashed with Israel, but has nevertheless engaged in back-channel discussions to secure humanitarian corridors and relief efforts. Egypt has traditionally acted as a bridge in ceasefire talks, given its direct border with Gaza. Saudi Arabia and Jordan, too, have leveraged their diplomatic relationships to keep communication lines open between the warring sides. Behind the president's words lies a humanitarian crisis that has galvanized international attention. Thousands have been killed and many more displaced in the months of conflict that preceded this announcement. The hostage issue has been one of the most emotionally charged elements of the war. Families of Israeli hostages held in Gaza, as well as relatives of Palestinians detained in Israeli prisons, have organized protests, vigils, and appeals for action. Trump's explicit reference to the parents of hostages and his somber acknowledgement of the condition of some of those being released underscored the deeply human dimension of what is often discussed in purely political or military terms. Throughout his address, the president emphasized unity, not merely among international actors, but also among local communities yearning for an end to the bloodshed. His declaration that everybody will be treated fairly was interpreted by some analysts as a message aimed at reassuring both sides, Israelis worried about security and Palestinians seeking relief from years of blockade and violence, that any agreement would not come at the expense of justice or dignity. Diplomatic insiders have described the negotiations as delicate and often on the verge of collapse. At several points, disagreements over the sequencing of hostage releases, the timing of pauses in fighting, and the distribution of humanitarian aid threatened to derail the talks. Yet, as one senior official put it, the involvement of multiple regional players created a web of mutual accountability that helped keep the parties at the table. The reaction from regional capitals to Trump's announcement has been cautiously hopeful. In Doha, Qatari officials reiterated their commitment to facilitating further discussions and expressed optimism that the breakthrough could be consolidated in the coming days. Turkish President Erdogan, whose government has often been sharply critical of Israeli military operations in Gaza, issued a measured statement urging all sides to seize what he called a narrow but historic window for peace. Egyptian diplomats, speaking off the record, acknowledged that while many hurdles remain, the acknowledgement by Hamas of a potential pathway toward de-escalation is itself a step forward. In Jerusalem, the Israeli government's response was restrained but not dismissive. Officials said they welcomed any progress that could lead to the return of hostages and a reduction in violence, but stressed that Israel's security would remain non-negotiable. Hardline members of the governing coalition have been less enthusiastic, warning that concessions to Hamas could embolden the group in the long term. For them, Trump's assurance that everybody will be treated fairly is viewed with some suspicion, as they fear it could translate into international pressure on Israel to ease its military posture. On the streets of Tel Aviv, meanwhile, families of hostages gathered outside the Prime Minister's residence, waving photographs of their loved ones and urging leaders to pursue the deal. "We just want them home," one mother said, echoing the sentiment that Trump himself had highlighted in his address, that for many parents, the only acceptable outcome is to see their children return alive, or at the very least have their remains brought home with dignity. In Gaza, reports suggest that news of the potential deal has brought a rare moment of cautious optimism to a population exhausted by months of airstrikes, shortages of medicine and food, and the constant threat of renewed fighting. Local commentators have pointed out that much will depend on the specifics of the arrangement, particularly whether it includes guarantees for sustained humanitarian access and reconstruction efforts. International organizations, including the United Nations and the International Committee of the Red Cross, have called for the parties to use this moment to build trust and prevent a return to full-scale hostilities. Human rights groups have stressed that any agreement must address not only the immediate concerns of hostages, but also the broader protection of civilians in conflict zones. For President Trump, the development represents both a diplomatic opportunity and a political gamble, while the prospect of brokering a breakthrough in Gaza could bolster his standing on the world stage and at home. Any setback, such as a breakdown in talks or renewed violence, could quickly reverse that perception. Analysts note that the president's messaging has been carefully calibrated to project optimism without declaring victory prematurely. What makes this moment especially noteworthy is the convergence of humanitarian urgency and geopolitical calculation. Regional powers like Saudi Arabia see in a Gaza ceasefire the possibility of reviving broader Arab-Israeli normalization talks, which had stalled amid the latest outbreak of violence. European leaders, grappling with their own domestic political pressures over the conflict, have welcomed any sign that Washington is again playing a constructive role as a mediator. Yet the road ahead remains fraught with obstacles. Deep-seated mistrust between Israelis and Palestinians cannot be erased overnight. Each side carries its own historical grievances and political pressures. Militant factions within Gaza, as well as hardline voices in Israel's cabinet, could still act as spoilers, either by rejecting the terms of an agreement or by carrying out provocations that reignite hostilities. Still, the president's statement, brief as it was, has injected a degree of hope into a situation that had long seemed immune to optimism. The image of Trump thanking regional partners and pledging fairness to all sides was quickly broadcast across international news networks and replayed in countless social media posts. The phrase, "everybody will be treated fairly," began trending within hours, capturing the attention of supporters and skeptics alike. For those who have followed this conflict over the decades, the events of this week serve as a reminder that even the most entrenched disputes can sometimes shift under the right combination of pressure, diplomacy, and timing. Whether this is one such moment remains to be seen. As we continue to monitor the situation, one thing is clear: the stakes could not be higher. The families of hostages on both sides wait in agonizing suspense. The civilians caught in the crossfire hope for even a brief respite from violence. And the world watches, wondering whether this time the words spoken in Washington will translate into lasting change on the ground in Gaza and beyond. In the coming days, all eyes will be on the details of the proposed agreement, how many hostages will be released, under what conditions, what steps Israel will take to ease its military operations, and what guarantees will be in place to prevent further outbreaks of violence. Diplomats caution that the process of translating political declarations into concrete steps is often the most challenging phase. For now, the president's promise that everybody will be treated fairly stands as both a reassurance and a test. Whether that promise can survive the pressures of the region's harsh realities will determine if this special day, as Trump described it, becomes a genuine turning point or just another fleeting headline in a conflict that has seen too many false dawns. This has been our special report on the latest development in the Gaza peace talks, as announced by President Donald Trump from Washington. We will continue to bring you updates as more details emerge and as the parties move from words to actions.
I want to thank the countries that helped me put this together: Qatar, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, and so many others. So many people fought so hard. This is a big day. We'll see how it all turns out. We have to get the final word down in concrete. Very importantly, I look forward to having the hostages come home to their parents and having some of the hostages, unfortunately, you know the condition they're in, come home likewise to their parents, because their parents wanted them just as much as though that young man or young woman were alive. So I just want to let you know that this is a very special day, maybe unprecedented in many ways. It is unprecedented. But thank you all, and thank you all to those great countries that helped. We were given a tremendous amount of help. Everybody was unified in wanting this war to end and seeing peace in the Middle East, and we're very close to achieving that. Thank you all, and everybody will be treated fairly.